Welcome to Nocturnal Ledger. In the archives of American folklore, there are thousands of ghost stories. There are tales of phantom hitchhikers, weeping women in white, and restless soldiers wandering old battlefields. Most of these can be dismissed as urban legends, the product of overactive imaginations or the retelling of myths that have lost their origins over time. But there is one case that stands apart. One case that refuses to be relegated to the realm of fiction. It is a story so thoroughly documented, witnessed by so many credible people, and so legally entangled that it holds a dark distinction in the history of the United States. This is the only known case in American history where a spirit, a poltergeist, or demonic entity is officially credited with the murder of a human being. We are traveling back to the raw, untamed frontier of Tennessee in the early 19th century, to a place called the Red River Settlement, now known as Adams, Tennessee. The year is 1817. The victim is a prosperous, respected landowner named John Bell. And the perpetrator is an entity that would come to be known as the Bell Witch. This is not a campfire story. This is a forensic examination of a haunting that defied the laws of physics, terrified a future president of the United States, and ultimately claimed a life. To understand the horror of what happened to the Bell family, we must first understand who they were. John Bell was not a man given to flights of fancy. He was a pillar of the community, a deacon in the Baptist church, and a successful farmer who owned hundreds of acres of land. He was a man of logic, a man of the earth. He had a large family, a loving wife named Lucy, and a reputation for honesty that was unimpeachable. This is important because when the terror began, John Bell did everything in his power to deny it. He tried to rationalize the irrational until the sheer weight of the supernatural crushed him. It began innocuously, as these things often do. It was a late summer evening in 1817. John was walking through his cornfield, the stalks high and dry, rustling in the wind. In the dimming light, he saw something sitting in the middle of a row. At first glance, it looked like a dog. But as he drew closer, the anatomy of the creature made no sense. It had the body of a large black dog, but the head of a rabbit. John, puzzled but not frightened, raised his gun and fired. The creature didn't yelp or run. It simply vanished, dissolved into the air. That evening, John sat at dinner, perhaps thinking his eyes had played a trick on him in the twilight. But that night, the house began to speak. It started with sounds on the exterior walls, a rhythmic, heavy thumping. It sounded like someone was taking a heavy plank and beating the side of the log cabin. John and his sons would run outside, lanterns held high, circling the house, expecting to catch a prankster or a neighbor playing a joke. There was no one. The moment they returned inside, the banging would resume, louder, more insistent. Over the coming weeks, the sounds migrated. They moved from the outside walls to the inside. The family began to hear scratching. It sounded like a massive rat gnawing on the bedposts. Yet when they lit the candles, the sound would stop. Then the sound changed to the heavy, wet noise of stones being dropped on the floor, or heavy chains being dragged across the wooden planks of the hallway. John Bell insisted the family keep this secret. He was a proud man. He did not want his neighbors to think madness had taken root in the Bell household. But the entity had no intention of staying quiet. The physical torment began with the children. In the dead of night, the covers would be ripped from their beds by invisible hands. They would wake up freezing, pulling the blankets back up, only to have them yanked away with violent force. Then came the hair pulling. The younger children would scream out in the darkness, feeling fingers tangling in their hair, jerking their heads back against the pillows. But the entity had a favorite target: Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter. Betsy was a vibrant, healthy young woman. But she became the epicenter of the violence. Witnesses who stayed at the Bell home, and there were eventually hundreds of them, watched in horror as invisible hands slapped her face. The sound of the slap would crack through the room like a pistol shot. And seconds later, a red handprint would bloom on her pale cheek. She would be pinched, stuck with pins, and beaten until she was breathless. John Bell finally broke his silence. He confided in his neighbor, James Johnson. Johnson, a skeptical man, offered to spend the night to help John catch whatever intruder was plaguing them. Johnson arrived with a Bible and a gun. He left the next morning, shaken to his core, terrified, and fully convinced that what was inside the Bell house was not of this world. As word spread, the Red River settlement was gripped by fear. But the entity seemed to feed on the attention. It grew stronger, and then it began to speak. It didn't speak in a ghostly whisper. It spoke clearly. It had a voice. Sometimes it was a harsh, gravelly whisper. Other times it was a low, singing croon. It identified itself initially as Kate. When asked what it was, the voice replied, "I am a spirit. I was once very happy, but I have been disturbed." The intelligence of the entity was the most disturbing aspect for the investigators of the time. This wasn't a mindless recording playing back sounds. It engaged in conversation. It knew things it could not possibly know. It would repeat, word for word, two distinct sermons given by two different preachers in two different churches 13 miles apart at the same time. It gossiped about the neighbors' secrets. It sang hymns. It quoted scripture. But above all else, it hated John Bell. While it teased the others, it declared a war of annihilation on John. It would curse him with the most vile, blasphemous language imaginable. It vowed to kill him. It would say, "Old Jack Bell, I will get you yet." As the years of 1818 and 1819 wore on, John Bell's health began to deteriorate rapidly. He suffered from strange episodes. His tongue would swell in his mouth until he couldn't eat or speak. His facial muscles would seize up, leaving him paralyzed with a rictus of pain on his face. As he lay in bed, unable to move, the voice would laugh. It would hover over his bed, mocking him, poking him, denying him sleep for days on end. The fame of the haunting spread beyond Tennessee. It reached the ears of General Andrew Jackson, the hero of the Battle of New Orleans and a future president of the United States. Jackson was a man of immense courage, a man who had fought duels and wars. He heard the stories and, being a man of action, decided he would go to Adams to expose the fraud. This is one of the most remarkable chapters in the saga. Andrew Jackson arrived with a wagon train of men, horses, and supplies. As they approached the property line of the Bell farm, the heavy wagon suddenly stopped dead. The road was flat and dry. The axles were greased. The horses pulled and strained, their hooves digging into the dirt. But the wagon would not move an inch. It was as if it were welded to the earth. Jackson, frustrated, lashed the horses, but nothing worked. Suddenly, a disembodied female voice floated from the bushes. "All right, General, let the wagon move on. I will see you again tonight." Immediately, the brakes released, and the horses trotted forward as if nothing had happened. That night, Jackson and his men stayed in the Bell cabin. One of Jackson's men, a self-proclaimed witch tamer, pulled out a pistol with a silver bullet and began to boast about how he would kill the spirit. He didn't get far. The man suddenly screamed, his body contorting as if he were being beaten by a stick. He was pummeled around the room by an invisible force, humiliated in front of his commander. Andrew Jackson, a man who feared no living army, was reported to have said the following morning as he left the property, "I had rather face the entire British Army at New Orleans than face this thing they call the Bell Witch." The entity was not merely a poltergeist, it was a force of nature. And its malice was focused. By the winter of 1820, John Bell was a shadow of his former self. He was gaunt, weak, and confined to his bed. The spirit had relentlessly worn him down, physically and psychologically. On the morning of December 19th, 1820, John Bell slipped into a coma. His family, gathered around his bedside, noticed something strange in the medicine cabinet. Instead of his usual medicine, there was a small, unknown vial containing a dark, smoky liquid. No one knew where it had come from. Dr. George Hobson was called to the scene. He examined the vial but could not identify the substance. As the family panicked, the voice of the witch filled the room, loud and triumphant. "It's useless for you to try to relieve old Jack," the voice screeched. "I have got him this time. He will never get up from that bed again." When asked about the vial, the voice cackled, "I put it there and gave old Jack a big dose of it last night while he was asleep, which fixed him." To test the liquid, the doctor took a straw and placed a drop of the black fluid on the tongue of the family cat. The animal went into immediate convulsions, spun in circles, and died within minutes. The toxicity was absolute. John Bell died the next day, December 20th, 1820. But the entity was not done. At John Bell's funeral, which was attended by hundreds of people from all over the county, the solemnity of the occasion was shattered. As the coffin was lowered into the frozen Tennessee earth, the voice began to sing. It sang rowdy, vulgar drinking songs. It laughed. It mocked the mourners. The singing continued until the last shovel of dirt was placed on the grave. The Bell Witch had fulfilled her promise. She had killed John Bell. In the aftermath of the murder, the activity slowed. The entity told the family it was leaving, but promised to return in 7 years. True to its word, it returned in 1828 to visit John Bell, Jr., engaging him in long philosophical conversations about the past, present, and future, including predicting the American Civil War and the World Wars. It then said it would leave for 107 years. But where did it go? This brings us to the physical scar that still exists on the land today. The Bell Witch Cave. Located on the property, near the Red River, is a karst limestone cave system. During the haunting, the children often reported seeing the entity retreating into this cave. It is a dark, damp, gaping maw in the side of the bluff. Stretching back hundreds of feet, the cave is a labyrinth of narrow passages and cavernous rooms. For centuries, folklore has suggested that caves are liminal spaces, thin places between our world and the underworld. The Bell Witch Cave is widely considered the epicenter of the energy that plagued the family. Even today, visitors to the cave report phenomena that mirror the events of 1817. Modern paranormal investigators, using equipment that John Bell could never have imagined, have ventured into the darkness of that cave. They have recorded electronic voice phenomena. Disembodied voices whispering names, growling, and telling them to get out. Cameras malfunction. Batteries drain instantly. People report the sensation of being touched, pushed, or overcome with a sudden, crushing nausea. There is a heaviness in that cave that defies geological explanation. The air is always cold, but there are pockets of intense, unnatural heat. Some have reported seeing a faint, glowing light deep in the tunnels, a light that has no source. What makes the Bell Witch case so terrifying is not just the violence, but the documentation. This isn't a story passed down through whispers. It is recorded in the diaries of those who were there. It is in the affidavits sworn by reliable men like James Johnson. It is in the biographies of Andrew Jackson. Richard Williams Bell, one of John's sons, wrote a manuscript titled Our Family Trouble. In it, he details the daily horror of living in a house under siege. He describes the despair of watching his father wither away, killed by something he could not fight, could not shoot, and could not reason with. Skeptics have tried for 200 years to debunk this case. They have suggested it was ventriloquism, perhaps practiced by the daughter Betsy. But could a young girl throw her voice to sound like two different preachers at once? Could she hold down a grown man and beat him? Could she stop a wagon train with her mind? Could she manufacture a poison that would kill a man and a cat instantly? Others suggest mass hysteria. But mass hysteria does not leave physical bruises. It does not leave handprints. It does not stop horses. The reality is far more unsettling. Something happened in Adams, Tennessee. Something ancient and malevolent targeted a specific family, systematically destroyed the patriarch, and then retreated into the earth. The legend says that if you visit the cave, you must not take anything with you. If you take a rock or a stone from the cave, you will be cursed. The owners of the property receive packages in the mail almost daily. Rocks returned by terrified tourists who experienced bad luck, sickness, and terror after taking a souvenir home. They beg for the rocks to be returned to the cave, to appease the spirit. John Bell is buried in the old cemetery in Adams. His grave is there, a testament to the man who fought a war against the invisible and lost. The cave remains open, a dark eye watching the Red River flow by. As you listen to this, consider the safety of your own home. You lock your doors to keep out intruders. You have alarms to protect you from thieves. But what protection do you have against something that can walk through walls? What defense is there against a hatred that transcends death? The Bell Witch claimed that she would return. She claimed dominion over that land. And if the reports from the cave are any indication, she never really left. She is still there, in the dark, waiting for the lights to go out. This has been a case file from the Nocturnal Ledger. The history books may call it a legend, but the grave of John Bell tells a different story. Reality is thinner than you think. Sleep well.